you think about a bank, you're paying a lighter interest rate. You're also not paying the kind of fees that you'll likely face in the private space. So he's saving 30% on 300 grand.
Yep.
So he's saving $90,000, the predatory private mortgage, because it's hard for me to see how a lender can charge 30, sometimes 40% total cost of borrowing, and for there to be a way for the borrower to sustain that and exit. Somebody comes along and says, I can sell you a dream for another year. You can keep the house for another year. But there's no real exit strategy. There's no, it's just
hope.
I'm going to eat up the rest of the equity.
It's a really emotional decision, because if you're, if you're getting wiped out by the interest payments over 3 years, it's pure emotion at that point.
You may look at the number of what it costs every month and think, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'll figure it out because I love my house. And that's a death trap.
This is The Wealthy Lender, episode 5. I'm here with Chris Nichilo, founder of Magnetic Capital Group. And today we'll be talking about 3 different types of borrowers. So those who get approved for a 3% mortgage, those who only get approved for a 14% mortgage, and those who only get approved for 28% and up. Let's go over the first one.
Okay, well, and just to sort of clarify with those numbers is kind of really what we're talking about, because there's a range. We're talking about someone who gets a bank mortgage, someone who gets a non-bank private loan, but a reasonable one, and then someone who really only qualifies for the highest type of interest and total cost of borrowing loan that's available in the market, and kind of separate what the differences are. And you're starting with that, what you tabled as a 3% mortgage. We're talking about a bank mortgage, right? Because sometimes, as we saw last couple of years, interest rates were a lot higher than 3%. So it's not necessarily 3%, but if you think about a bank or a trust company or an insurance company, an institutional mortgage, the big difference is you're paying a lighter interest rate, but you're also not paying the kind of fees that you'll likely face in the private space. So when you go to a bank, there's often no significant fee, just you're paying the interest. When you go to a B-level bank or a trust company, you're going to see some sort of fee on top of the interest, but you're still going to be certainly in single digits for total cost of borrowing, including any legal fees you might have to pay, any administrative setup fees or any of that. You're in almost every case going to be in single digits. But when you don't qualify and you don't meet the bank's guidelines, and you need to look into the private space, there's kind of 2 types of private mortgage, if you will, and I don't mean that industry wide everybody knows there's 2 types of private mortgage. I just mean from my experience, in my own words, there's sort of 2 types, 2 tiers of private mortgages. And in the beginning there, you referred to them as a 14% mortgage and then a 28% mortgage. And it can be, in and around 14. It can be in and around 28. It could be bigger, heavier than 28%. But it's easier to conceptualize if people understand there's sort of 2 tiers. And one would be the private loan that performs much like a bridge loan, okay? And the private loan that is kind of almost impossible to get out of, right? So it's almost there's a sort of a running joke in the private space about the loan to own program, right? And people in that highest tier of private mortgage paying the highest total cost of borrowing are usually people who are delaying the inevitable, right? That they're going to have to sell the property, or it's going to be sold under power of sale. And you certainly don't want to be in that category. But I'm going to distinguish between the 2 because it's very important to understand them. So when I say a bridge loan, a private loan that behaves as a bridge, we're talking about, you might call it an ethical private mortgage, because private mortgages, although expensive, they are sustainable for a short period of time, and they should be designed right with from an ethical perspective. The idea should be, yes, it's going to cost more to get a private loan, but it's a bridge back to the bank, right? So it's an opportunity to get something short term that you do qualify for, so that you can access the equity in the house, which you can take and use to solve some financial problem that's keeping you from qualifying at a bank, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the exit is clear and defined.
Exactly. And there is one. It's viable, right? So it's not just that it's clear and defined, but it's viable. Now, let's remember, there's only two ways out of a private mortgage. One is to refinance with a bank or another private lender, and the other is to sell the property. There's only two ways out. So typically, when you're looking at that sort of 14% mortgage, you might be looking at something, for example, a second mortgage where the interest rate is 10%, the lender fee is 2 or 3%. There's a broker fee because you were referred to the lender by a broker, and it's 1 or 2%. You got legal fees in there. And so the total cost of borrowing, when you add it all up with interest and fees and legals and all that, somewhere in that 13, 14, 15, maybe 16% per
Right.
year. Now you look at that, right? And you say, okay, you got $100,000 loan. It's going to cost you $15,000 to pay for it, right? And so really what you're taking on a loan of 100, but you're really getting 85. So the
Right.
question is, does the 85,000 give you enough to reverse whatever circumstances are keeping you from getting a bank loan, paying debts, like consolidating, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
Fixing something in the house, whatever it is, buying time for you to get a job or settle into a new job and establish the kind of track record of employment that the bank wants to see, right? So or you just started a business and you're going to float the business for a little while to amass a track record so you can show the bank that you're doing okay, you're making an income, and so on. You understand?
Yeah, can you
So
speak to that? Those are making moves. Like, it's not necessarily to solve a problem, but it's kind of like making a move. Let's say they want to purchase, plot of land or a property and do something with it, or they're not necessarily under stress. They're just trying
yeah,
to
I
make a
mean,
move.
the application of a private mortgage isn't always dire. There are very successful, for example, very successful landlords, property managers who unfortunately reach the end of what they can qualify for at a bank, and they need a private mortgage um, to supplement, to keep acquiring property, right?
Right.
Um, you could have a situation where you need a private mortgage to improve the value of your house so that you can appraise it and then qualify at a bank. So, for example, let's say the house is worth $900,000 today, and you have a bank mortgage, or you need a bank mortgage of 800, but you don't qualify for 800 at the bank for one reason or another, but you're able to access some equity privately and be able to improve the property to now be a value of $1 million, and now your loan to value at 800 becomes 80%, and suddenly now you're within the bank's guidelines to at least apply and see if you can qualify. So I mean, there could be that type of play. I would say that play is fairly uncommon, not something that necessarily works all the time, but if carefully calculated, it could be a good application of a private mortgage. And then of course you have, the most popular is probably debt consolidation.
That's the most popular.
Yeah, because when you have when you have debts, like with credit cards and whatnot, they all come with sort of a minimum payment that counts against your debt servicing ratios. And if you can pay those debts off, your income goes a little further in terms of qualifying for a bank mortgage.
Hmm.
Right. So The idea being that the 14% mortgage that you spoke of, or sort of the middle tier, first tier of a private, is something short term that leads to a refinance, or something where the borrower, here's a good application. Listen, I know I have to sell, but I'd like to do a little bit of work in the house so I can get top dollar for my house, and the bank won't give it to me. So my exit is to sell, but I'm going to take a private mortgage and pay, the $10,000 or $15,000 it costs for the year to prepare my house properly to sell under no duress.
Right. Okay. So there's those people. And can you speak to, because you've mentioned the fringe borrowers, like that barely don't make the cut with the bank.
Mhm.
Um, there's some really, really high quality borrowers when you take into account like the reason why they got denied. Like, for example, I have a relative who's got his roofing business, incorporated, and he pays himself very little. So his T4 is really low. And he wanted to buy a piece of land, and it wasn't raw land. It was like developed. It's just there wasn't any property on it. And the B lender didn't want to lend for a land purchase. Um, but since he paid himself so little, even though he makes, let's say, 25,000 a month through his business, he pays himself, maybe low 60s or whatever. And the bank just says no. The B lender says no. And he's got like an 800 credit score. Like everything's, all the boxes are checked off. And he's in a private lender situation.
Well, and is it a first mortgage?
Second,
Second mortgage for how much?
it was
Ballpark. 100, 200,
250.
250. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just walk through some of the math. So it's a great example because it's a person that has the means but doesn't qualify on paper the way the bank wants it to, right? And so you look at it from the borrower's perspective. So he's got to do a few things. Maybe, so he's got to decide. Maybe private for him is going to be a longer term thing. And he's accepting that because he's done this math. He's looked at it and gone, would you say 25,000 a month, right?
Yeah,
So 300 grand a year.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not showing all that income on paper, and therefore probably not paying all the income tax that he would have to pay if he did. So let's say he's running that all through a corporation. He's paying, call it 15% tax.
Yep.
Instead of 45. Okay. So he's saving 30% on 300 grand.
Yep.
So he's saving $90,000.
Yep.
But the consequence is he's got to get $250,000 from a bank or from a private lender. And the cost is probably what? 10% higher?
Best he found was 9.
Plus fees and whatnot.
Yeah.
Let's call it
Yep.
10% higher than the bank. Okay.
Yep.
So he's paying 10% more on 250,000, 25 grand. He's up 5,000. Right?
Yeah.
He could
right.
show all the money and get the bank mortgage. And then he'd
Yeah.
save the 25
Well,
grand, but it would cost him 30.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely going to be paying himself more over the next 2 years and then go back to the bank.
Well, but the point being is, my point isn't that he's playing some sort of game. What'll happen is a lot of these sort of entrepreneurs, this is such a perfect case. Like you picked it out of the air, but it's like, it's ideal to prove the point. If I'm the entrepreneur, I look at it and go, well, I haven't shown all my income to date because I was developing the business and I didn't know how good it was going to be, but now I'm getting a sense for that. And so now I'm getting all my books in order. I can still get the mortgage today privately. It'll cost me the same as if I was paying income tax and qualified at the bank.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to go and do what I need to do to qualify at the bank, and I'll switch over. But I'm still around even. Like it's the same money. People have this impression that a private mortgage is so ridiculous expense wise, but in that particular case, you can see that it's six of one, half a dozen of the other. Either you qualify at the bank and you pay the income tax, or you don't qualify at the bank, you get the mortgage privately and you pay interest and fees.
The money goes somewhere.
The money's going. So it's a great way to show that this particular type of private mortgage, when used properly, right? Like the bridge type private mortgage, the ethical private mortgage, works. It works short term. It can even work long term in the case you just described. But the point is it's a bridge back to a different place. What it does is it prevents or helps people avoid leaving the housing market altogether.
Yep.
And we all
Yeah.
know that the hardest thing once you're out of the housing market is to get back in.
Oh yeah. No, you lose all those perks, those first-time home buyer perks and everything. It's
Well, I mean, it's just difficult to save the down payment.
yeah, you have to start all over again.
Yeah, so it's hard enough to get in. And don't forget, these people, to even be a candidate for a private mortgage, they had to have done something right because they have to have equity in the house. So this is just someone who's come upon a tough time or found themselves in a difficult spot, but it's reversible.
Mhm.
It's fixable. And so now the private mortgage becomes an important tool to keeping people in their homes. And as we've talked about before, avoiding having these pockets of time where so many borrowers have to sell that it really hurts the value of the real estate in general.
Yeah. And this really lifted the veil for me as an investor because when I found out that these are not to put all borrowers in the same category, but like certain high quality borrowers are getting turned down by the bank. You mix that with the collateral and then you're sort of like, well, this is great investment wise. Like it gives you a lot of comfort.
Well, let's remember, I was just telling someone this today. You're getting the same collateral that the owner was going to offer the bank for 4%. You're just getting a premium. It's no different. You're
Yeah,
getting
because
the
you had to
same,
dig a little deeper and it didn't fit in the
yeah,
standardized spreadsheet or whatever.
you're being offered the same security that the bank would have been happy with had all the other ducks been in a row, the income, the employment, everything else, according to bank standards. But we know that bank standards are extremely tight and that there are a lot of good people out there who have great collateral, have the ability to pay, and have a viable exit strategy. And they'll pay you a big premium over what they'd pay the bank, giving them the exact same collateral.
Yep. Do banks do seconds?
No,
Okay.
they do lines of credit, home equity lines of
Yeah.
credit, which function like a second, but they're really just part of one charge.
Hmm. Okay.
So you've got
Yeah.
those two, okay? So those are the first two is the bank. And then you've got what I would call, I guess, the ethical private mortgage, the one that has a viable exit, within a reasonable period of time and serves a real purpose to help navigate or bridge over a difficult time.
Right.
Then you have the third type. And we can very comfortably call this the predatory mortgage, the predatory private mortgage, because it's hard for me to see how a lender can charge, 30, sometimes 40% total cost of borrowing, and for there to be a way for the borrower to sustain that and exit.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's sustainable, if there is an exit, the only reason a borrower would choose a total cost of borrowing of 28, 30, 35, 40% is because either they don't know they have any other option, right? Like they haven't run into us, or they did run into us and we all said no. In which case they become desperate. Now, you can imagine how somebody who's worked so hard to get into their home and buy it and own it and has owned it for years runs into a tough time, things don't get better, and then somebody comes along, they're faced with the prospect that they have to sell this house, they have to leave the market. But somebody comes along and says, I can sell you a dream for another year. you can keep the house for another year. But there's no real exit strategy. There's no, it's just I'm
Hope.
I'm going to eat up the rest of the equity.
It's a really emotional decision because if you're, if you're getting wiped out by the interest payments over 3 years, it's pure emotion at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, if the interest rate is 15 or 16%, which is out there, you don't have to be a genius, okay, to think how. I mean, how long could you pay 15 or 16% on your mortgage? I mean, if interest rates at the bank went up to 15 or 16%, what kind of panic would we see?
Uh, well, I wasn't there in the 80s, but apparently that happened. I
But
don't
when
know.
interest rates start to rise, what do people reference all the time? The 80s.
Yeah.
That's what they do. They all say, "Remember the 80s? It was crazy. It could happen again." Da, da, da. And it's panic because it's unsustainable long term. So when you start to see opportunity, like, I've talked to a lot of private lenders, a lot of investors who have come to Magnetic, and they have experience with other private lenders, right? Like they other outfits like ours, other administrators, other places that they can access private mortgage inventory. Well, when they say to me, this other place, they're offering me 16%, or they're offering me 15%. I every time I tell them this, you will never find that here, because I don't want to be in those types of mortgages because risk and return are positively correlated. When one goes up, so does the other. The only person who's going to pay you 15 or 16% is someone who can't find 10 or 9 or 8 somewhere else. And if they can't find 10, 9, or 8, there's only two reasons why. One, they didn't look in enough places, or they're just not aware of enough private lenders, or all of them said no. All the 8s and 9s and 10s said no, just like the 4 at the bank. And if all the 8s, 9s, and 10s said no, and then the 11s and 12s said no, and the only option is the 15 or 16s, there's probably a reason.
What's the state? Because you guys turned down 8 out of every 10, right?
Roughly. Yeah.
What would you say is like the recurring state of mind? Like, what's the conversation? If there had to be like a recurring theme in those conversations,
The ones that we
what-
decline,
yeah.
we just can't add enough value. That's
No, no, no. I mean the borrower. Like, what's he thinking, or what are or she or they like? What?
the borrower's
eh,
just the borrower in the ones we decline, you mean, right?
Yes.
Yeah, listen, the borrower's doing everything they can to stay in the house. They're looking for a way. And it's not lost on me that when we give a borrower or their broker bad news, the truth, right? Hey, we looked at this. We looked at it from different angles. We looked for, you know, a way this could be structured where we could feel good that you'll be able to sustain the payments and you'll be able to exit in a reasonable period of time. We couldn't find one. Like, we can't buy into it. The numbers don't work. We've looked at the credit, we've looked at the income, we looked at the employment. We can't see a viable path that's healthy for you. It has to be win-win. The private mortgage has to be win-win. It's good for us, but listen, I would all day long rather to take 65% loan to value, first mortgage, and earn 6 or 7% and never lose a night of sleep, than to take 15, 16% on a second mortgage at 85% loan to value and sweat. And that's just me thinking about me. Now, when you start thinking about the borrower, which we all should do, I mean,
Yes.
this is just another Canadian homeowner. It's Canadian to Canadian. So you should be looking out for your fellow person and be able to say to them, you know what, I looked at this, I'd love to help, but I don't think I can help. I don't think if I gave you the money, I'm actually helping. I'm hurting you. You'd be better off to sell the property today and take all the equity that's there and do something with it, rather than to give thousands and thousands of dollars to me without a surefire way out. So because you don't and listen, they don't have to listen to me. I'm sure a lot of times they don't. They find somebody. There are people out there, right? There are private lenders out there who, sell on price, right? They advertise to investors. They say, hey, come here, you can get 15, 16%. And the amateur or uneducated, untrained investor sees that and it sounds right. Well, we're only lending them 90% of the value of the house, And if you don't know the difference, you go, well, it's 90%, it's not 100%, there's still 10%. That's good. I've got good security and I can make 15, 16%. But once you've been in the space enough, you realize there's a reason why insured mortgages at a bank are mortgages where you're borrowing more than 80% of the value of the house. Like, there's a lot of data to support why banks want insurance to lend somebody 90 or 95%.
There's a reason that risk is offloaded somewhere else.
In private, there's no insurance. So we don't lend more than 80%. And oftentimes it's 75 or less. But are there guys out there who will lend you 90? Yeah. And when you're in power sale and you just need to get the house back and under control, and somebody offers you an opportunity to do that, you may look at the number of what it costs every month and think, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'll figure it out because I love my house. And that's a death trap.
Yeah, I'll figure it out again, it's hope. It's an unfortunate situation people find themselves in, but at the end of the day, it's a reality check.
Yeah. So ultimately we need to protect those borrowers if we're going to behave in an ethical manner. And look, here's the best part. You can do private mortgages against residential properties all day long and make 7, 8, 9, even 10 on average, doing a whole assortment of firsts and seconds, but very safe mortgages. And those returns will get you ahead, especially if this is your fixed income asset part of your portfolio. I mean, it's stable, it's consistent, it's enough is the point. And it's excellent relative to the security. So we don't need to get into the 28%, the 30% borrower. We don't. And it's like a shiny object that's bad for everybody.
I value the sleep.
I do too.
Great.
All right.
Till next time.
Till next time.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.